Hello and welcome back. This is Jennifer McGuire and I'm glad you're here. So I had a lot of fun putting together today's video because I was able to create beautiful backgrounds with a very easy to use tool. Creating backgrounds is a favorite of mine because you can just add a sentiment, any sentiment you want, and you're good to go. I also like backgrounds that can be created with any stamps you already have on hand. So I'm going to show you a bunch of examples today of this particular technique and different size cards. And I had so many different ideas to share with you that I will have a second video on this topic going up very soon. So stay tuned for that. But let's start with the basics today. For most of today's cards, I'll be using a card kit from Gina K Designs. This is a new one called Eclectic Fun. Now the value of this is over twice the cost of it. So it's one of those that gives you a lot of bang for your buck. Now this has two 6x8 stamp sets. That's a big size. A 4x6 stamp set, coordinating dies for those sets, a handful of cardstock, and the best part, there's a wreath builder in this, a new and improved large wreath builder that works with the traditional size stamping tool. That's what today will be focused on, and it's an amazing tool that you can use with any stamps you have. One of the things that I like about Gina K Designs kits and why I use them in videos is the value, and that most of the things in the kits are tools that can be used over and over again. And one thing that most kits don't offer, there's a variety of styles. Each of the 3 stamp sets has a different look, so you can get different looking cards from one kit. So the highlight of this kit is definitely that large wreath builder. Now this allows you to create backgrounds on larger pieces of cardstock than the original wreath builder, but still fit in a traditional size stamping tool. If you've never seen a wreath builder in action, I highly recommend checking out the videos that I have linked up here on the top right because I have lots of ideas. But this one allows you to create bigger backgrounds. And these backgrounds will be formed into a repetitive pattern in a circle. So you can create a wreath or a full background. It's really cool and you'll see that today. This tool is actually designed for square pieces, but you can use it for non-square, and I'll show you that today. But the size of square pieces this allows is 4 3/4, 5 1/4, and 5 3/4 inches. Now, if you want to do the smaller of the sizes, you can put it in these little pieces, and that will allow you to do that. However, I like to focus on the largest piece because you can create a large background and trim it down to any size you want. And again, I'll show you that too. Now you need a stamping tool for this. I use the traditional or original size stamping tool and it works great. Whenever I use a wreath builder in my stamping tool, I do like to tape it onto the grid mat so it doesn't move. However, you'll notice today that the grid mat isn't showing because I flipped it over so the black side is showing, just so it would show up better in the video. You could definitely use the grid side. Now I think this is worth sharing again, but remember there are these smaller little template additions you can put into the wreath builder so you can do smaller square pieces of cardstock. However, I'm focusing on that larger opening, which is 5 3/4 inches. Now this newer wreath builder also comes with this centerpiece. This centerpiece is helpful for placement. You can see there are centering lines and circles that allow you to better place your stamps. You'll see me use this a lot in today's video. You'll also notice that I use a permanent pen to mark like the center point and the circles and lines that are engraved in this centerpiece of the wreath builder. You don't need to do that. I only do these things so you can better see it in the video. The etched lines are easy to see in person. Now this may look like a complicated and confusing tool, but I promise you it's easy to use and allows you to use stamps you have on hand in creative ways. Let's start with our first example, which is very basic and shows you how you can make a large card using this wreath builder. Let's start with the center and focal point element, which is the sentiment. For this, I'm using the new Gina K Designs Little Cutie stamp set. These have some large cutie images along with lots of sentiments. I'll be using the large You're Amazing sentiment for this card, but I'll use some of the smaller ones for later cards in this video. Okay, now for this card, I'm starting with the largest size square you can use for this new wreath builder, and that is 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. I'm using my T-roller to find the center point in both directions. I make a little tick mark in one direction at the halfway point, then a tick mark in the other direction at the halfway point. Where those tick marks cross or create a plus is the center point of that square. This is very helpful and a great way to find that little center point to put your sentiment, but you could also eyeball it if you prefer. Now that I know where the center is, I will position my sentiment right on that center point and stamp this right in the center of our square piece of cardstock. Again, this is just plain white cardstock at 5 3/4 by 5 3/4, just a little bit smaller than 6 inches by 6 inches. Now, if you don't want to create a card that big, that's okay. You can create it this big and then trim it down to what area you want. Now it's time to pick an image that will repeat around our background to create this card. I'm using this little butterfly that's in the new Gina K Designs Fresh Flower stamp set. I really like the size and the pattern in this butterfly. You can use any image that you may have on hand. I just was a fan of this one, and there is a coordinating die available to go with it, which we'll also use for this technique. Let's start with the basic wreath building technique using this new wreath builder. So I have my wreath builder template inside of my MISTI stamping tool, as I showed you before. The black side is facing up just so you could see it better in the video. I also have our piece of cardstock once again. It's 5 3/4 by 5 3/4 with our sentiment right in the center. I'm going to pop this right into our wreath builder template. Watch how it fits right there on the top right and bottom right. Fits right into that template, and I'll put a magnet on it to hold it. Now I have the center guide of the wreath builder. You can see how it's centered up there on those little black corners. See how it's centered up there? That will help us guide where we put our stamped image. So I'm laying the butterfly over here. On that guide piece that we're holding right there in the center, there are straight lines and circles to get it positioned just right. I'll show you that a little closer later on. But for right now, I'm just positioning that butterfly to be next to our sentiment, but not overlapping it. I then can close the door on my MISTI stamping tool, remove that center guideline, and start stamping. Notice that my top right and bottom right corners are still in the template. I'll stamp this with ink. Any ink will work here. I'm using Gina K Designs ink. I then turn it one turn and notice it fits in these other corners, the top up there on the top of the screen and the right of the screen. And I'll stamp it again. Then I'll turn it one more turn. So our corners are at the top right and bottom right. And I'll stamp that once again. Each time I'm stamping it in the same color ink. This is Gina K Designs Turquoise Sea. I rotated it one more turn and I'll stamp it again. So you can change this up and do each turn a different color. But as you turn this cardstock, you'll form a perfect circle of these butterfly images. You can do any images that you want, anything you have on hand here. But look how perfect that is. That definitely would have taken a lot of effort to measure those all out. This wreath builder makes it very easy. Okay, so now that I have my circle of blue butterflies ready, let's do another circle that's closer to the sentiment, but in green. So I put it back in its original position, where the top right and bottom right are in the little corners of the template. I'll take my butterfly and kind of center it up between two blue butterflies, but closer to the sentiment. See how it overlaps the blue a bit? This will make for some messy overlap stamping, but don't worry about it. We'll clean it up later. Now for this first butterfly image, I'm stamping with Concord and 9th Sprout ink. This is a super light green ink. What I like about this ink is you can stamp it once for very light, but then stamp it additional times to make the ink darker. So it gives you a lot of options with one ink pad. So I'm stamping this, I believe, 3 times, and it gives me a great light green. I'll then rotate my cardstock again, and this time stamp with a darker green. This is Gina K Lucky Clover, a beautiful, perfect Kelly green. So I stamp that. Now I'll rotate it one more turn in my wreath builder. It fits in that little spot every time. And this time I'll go back to the lighter green. This is that Concord and 9th ink, and I'll stamp it 3 times to get that perfect light green shade that works for this project. Once I'm done with that, I rotate it again. And now I'll stamp back to the darker green color, which is the Lucky Clover from Gina K. So for the blue circle, I did all the same color blue. For this green, I'm alternating between a light green and a darker green, just to offer a little more interest in our final background. Again, these butterfly stamped images are overlapping and it'll look a little bit messy at first, but I'll fix that later on with a very easy technique, so stay tuned. And remember, this is 5 3/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches. It's a big square piece. You can always finish it and trim it down to whatever size you want, but I plan to do a large square card. Okay, now we can put our cardstock back in position, right into the template in the top right and bottom right corners. We're going to create a third circle of butterflies towards the outside. So I'm positioning it just outside of the green butterflies that we have done. This time I'm using 2 shades of true blue color ink. This first one is Sky Blue from Hero Arts. It's very light, so I'm going to stamp it a couple times to make it a bit darker. I will then rotate my cardstock and stamp it with a brighter blue, which is Cornflower from Hero Arts. You can use any inks you want here. So I will continue to rotate my cardstock, each time lining it up in the corners of the template and making sure that I stamp it alternating between light blue and a bit darker blue. Notice that it doesn't matter that the cardstock is hanging outside of the MISTI stamping tool, as long as it fits on the right-hand side into that wreath builder template. And I will continue stamping until that blue circle of butterflies has been formed. Now remember how we overlapped the first circle of butterflies, the ones that are in the turquoise color. What we're going to do is glue other butterflies on top of that, so you don't see that overlap. So on a separate piece of white cardstock, I'm stamping 4 butterflies in the same blue color, which is turquoise sea. I will then stamp 4 butterflies in a lighter blue color, which is Concord and 9th Aqua Sky. So these will get die cut and glued on top of the background we just created. You could have also used masking to avoid overlap with the stamping, which I'll show in my next video that'll come out in a few days. So now I have 4 light blue butterflies and 4 medium blue butterflies, and I die cut additional butterflies to glue behind each of these, so there's some dimension to them. You could also use foam tape if you want. Now to glue these on top of the turquoise butterflies that are already in our background, I could have just eyeballed it and tried to get them positioned just right, but instead I'm using the negative space of my die cutting. So watch, over this turquoise butterfly over here on the right, I'm putting some adhesive. Then I take a negative space of the butterfly and line it up with the stamping that's already there, with the glue facing up. I'll then pop in my die cut butterfly right into that negative space, and it's positioned perfectly. By using the negative space, I can be sure that the position is just right for these die cut butterflies I'm gluing on top. Now you could instead just eyeball this, but I figure I took the time to do the precision stamping and placement of stamping for all of those butterflies, so I might as well continue to do so by using the negative space as a guide. After I've positioned all of my dimensional butterflies on top of the turquoise butterflies we stamped, I'm adding some gemstones. Any gemstones would work. Here I'm using green, light blue, and blue colored gemstones from Trinity stamps, and I'm placing them into the pattern that we've already stamped. This will just add some sparkle and enhance that circular pattern that we've created. Now it's time to create the 6x6 note card that this piece will go on. I have some 12x12 white cardstock that I've had for a long time, and from it I cut a 6x6 square note card. I'm putting adhesive on the front of that and gluing a light blue piece of cardstock that is 6x6. So from the front it looks like my note card is blue, but I didn't have light blue 12x12 cardstock, so I created this illusion by putting blue just on the front. Then on the front of this, I can add our 5 3/4 inch by 5 3/4 inch stamped piece. So here's our completed card, 6 inches by 6 inches, and I have an envelope perfect for that size. I love making large square cards like this because it's unique and something that they can put on display or frame if they wanted to. Now I did add into the inside a piece of white cardstock that's slightly smaller than 6 by 6. The reason I do this is it gives more stability to the inside of the card. Since the front is large and has heavy weight to it because we added the additional die cuts and the gemstones, I want it to be able to stand up and stand on display. So by putting that additional piece of cardstock on the inside, it is much stronger. Here you can see the dimension we have from these additional butterflies and the sparkle that we have from the gemstones we added. This is definitely a card to put on display or to frame, and it's really a special card that doesn't take that long to put together thanks to the Wreath Builder tool. Let's do another card example that is larger. This is Slimline. It's 8.5 by 3.5 inches, and we'll be using that new Wreath Builder to create it. Now for this one, I'm using the new Gina K Designs Absolutely Autumn stamp set. This has beautiful sentiments in it, also some autumn images that I'll use to create the wreath on the front of our card. I have a piece of white cardstock that is 3.5 by 8.5 inches, which is perfect for a slimline card. I'm putting an X in one of the corners, and that corner is the corner that will fit into our Wreath Builder template. None of the other corners will. Just stick with me and you'll see what I mean. See how that little X corner is fit into the template? Then on the other corner, I put a leaf image. This will create half of a wreath on our card towards the top right corner. So I've got that position there, and now we can stamp that first stamped image. I'm stamping it with Gina K Amalgam black ink so that I can color it with whatever I want when I'm done. Now I'm rotating it one turn. Again, only putting the corner with the X into the template. So it's now on that right-hand corner. And I'll stamp again. Now once I've stamped this, I can turn it one more turn. So watch, the X'd corner goes into the template. Don't worry about the other corners. That's the only one that matters for this particular technique. Now I will ink up my stamp and stamp it again. You'll start to see that we're forming a semicircle or half of a wreath towards the top right of this piece of cardstock. Again, one more turn, move to the next position, putting that X'd corner into the template, and we'll stamp again. Please note that in my next video, I'll show another way to create a slimline card with the focal point of the wreath at the center if you want that instead. Okay, so now we rotate it again. The X is fitting into the template, and notice you're still able to close the door on your MISTI stamping tool even with that cardstock hanging out towards the right. And then I'll stamp it one more time. So you can see we have half of a wreath forming there on that one side of our slimline note card piece. Okay, back to the original position with the X in that bottom corner of the template and picking another image. This is another leaf image from the same stamp set. I'll stamp that with black ink. I like to double stamp to make it nice and dark. Then I go to the next position, always making sure that the X'd corner ends up in the corner of our stamping tool. Rotate it again and continue to stamp. And I'll do this all the way around so that we have this spot of our wreath filled with this stamped image. Now you can do this with solid stamped images, outlined, anything you want. In my first example, I just did basic stamping. Here we're doing outline stamping and we'll color them. Okay, back to the original position. And this time I'm using a smaller leaf image to fill in those areas. And in fact, I'm doing 2 small leaf images. That way I can stamp 2 at once. So you don't have to do single images each time. You can do multiple images. After I stamp that original position, we can again rotate our paper just one turn to put the X corner into the next position of the Wreath Builder, and then continue to go around all of the turns. I love that this Wreath Builder was designed to fit in an original stamping tool, a basic size stamping tool, and you can have the cardstock hanging out, but it still works. You can make larger size cards. So I continued to do this, and I added a few additional images in the same way until I had this wreath made of leaves that I liked, and I erased that X we had in the corner. After coloring all those leaves, I used Copic markers for it. I did trim that piece down to be 8.25 by 3.5 inches. Then I added it onto a green note card that was 8.5 inches by 3 3/4 inches, which is a nice size for a slimline card. I also stamped a sentiment from the same stamp set that I got the leaves from, and added some Trinity stamped satin gold gemstones. On the inside, I added a piece of white cardstock, not only for stability for our card, but a place to write a personal message on the inside. So you can use this wreath builder and original stamping tool to create a slimline card. And again, in my next video, I will show another way to create slimline cards using this wreath builder. Here's a little peek at it. It's really fun how you can create these patterns that kind of radiate from the center. And this was done with all stamped images. Okay, let's do another example. This time, it's a mini slimline card, which is about 3.5 inches by 6.25 inches. It's a unique card size, and I used the wreath builder to create this rainbow. You could use any small images for this, but for my video, I used the little heart from this Gina K Designs Little Love Bundle stamp set. A great stamp set that I showed in a previous video, which I'll link to in the top right here. Now, I thought it would be helpful if I colored in some of the etched circles of our little wreath builder guide here with a pencil. You don't have to do that. I end up doing it later again with a permanent pen. I'm just doing this so you can better see it in the video. In real life, it's pretty obvious to see it. I have a piece of 5 3/4 by 5 3/4 inch cardstock, just like before. This is my favorite size to use with this new template. So I pop it right into the opening as we did before. Now I have that center guide piece. You can see it there with the pencil filling it in so you can see it better in the video. I'll put that right in the center. You can see that it's in the center by seeing those black triangles at the top, right, and bottom. You just want to kind of eyeball it to center it there. Once I have it centered, I'm taking a heart and putting it on the outside most circle that I've penciled there. See how it lines up there? The tip of the heart, it's upside down, lines up with that circle and the straight line out. You'll see more of this in a moment. So I've positioned that there in the bottom center, and I'm stamping that with Passionate Pink ink. I'll then rotate one turn and stamp it again. Every time we rotate it, it's fitting right back into those corner squares on the right-hand side. The left-hand side will always hang outside of the MISTI stamping tool, but that's okay. That allows us to use a bigger piece of cardstock than our original stamping tool can handle. Okay, so I'll continue to stamp this around, and you'll see our circle of pink hearts form. Now it's time to put that guide back in the center, looking at those black triangles over there to line it up. And now we can add our next heart in. This one will be a little bit towards the center, but lined up with the pink heart we've already done. I'm using that pencil line or etch line on our guide to make sure it's straight going towards the center. See it there positioned just next to the pink heart. Now I can close the door on our stamping tool to grab that stamp, remove the guide, and this time we'll stamp with an orange ink. So now we can ink up our stamp and stamp that, rotate it one turn, and then stamp it again. And we'll continue to rotate and stamp, fitting our cardstock into that template and stamping each time. This will form an orange circle of hearts right inside the pink. Now we're back to the original position, adding our template on top, centering that up, and now we can do our next heart. Each time I'm using the lines and the circles etched in that centerpiece to make sure I'm still following the pattern. So I'm following that line and following those circles to get the spacing just right. And it's really easy to do in real life. You just got to see it in real life to do it. So I did that with yellow and I did that with green, each time moving my heart stamp in towards the center. And now I'm doing that with blue. I stamp it, rotate it, and stamp it again. Now I have my rainbow going towards the center. However, I wanted more hearts in between those. So I have my little template here that I'm lining up with the hearts I've already done. It's really easy to use those lines to line up with what you've already stamped. I'll hold that there with my magnets, and now I'll position a heart in between the blue ones we've already stamped. This will add additional blue hearts in between to fill it out more. So if you start forming a wreath or a background and it seems too spaced out, just add an image in between each. So you notice each time I stamp this, it's stamping in between the ones we've already done. Very easy to do. You just need to give it a try, and I promise it's easy to follow. It was at this point I thought it would be helpful if I filled in the etched lines, the straight lines on this center template with a black permanent pen. It'll help me, but I think it's even better when watching in a video. You do not need to do this. You can see the etched lines in person, but I wanted you to be better able to see them in the video, and I just thought of it at this point. Okay, so now let's continue. I need to do some green hearts to fill in that area between. So I've got my piece in the template, putting my template on the top of that, making sure it's center. Now I can add another heart between the green ones we've already done, and I'm following that line going out, which makes it easier to get the position just right. I close the door on my tool to pick up that stamp, remove the guide in the center, make sure my cardstock piece is in the template, and start stamping. Now you could do a different color of ink each time you turn this, but this time I wanted everything in the same circle to be the same color, so it forms a rainbow in the end. Now I will continue to do this using that center guide to position my little hearts. This time I'm moving onto the yellow, which is between the yellow hearts I've already done, and I'll stamp those going around. And before you know it, I'll have the yellow, orange, and pink hearts also added in between the ones we've already stamped. Once I'm done, I'm going to cut this into two pieces, so I have two rainbows. I can use these two pieces on two mini Slimline cards. They're 5 3/4 inches wide, which is nice for a mini Slimline card. Now I felt like there was still a little bit too much open space in between our rows of rainbow hearts, so I thought I would add in between some gemstones of the same color. So you'll see there are pink, orange, yellow, green, and blue gemstones in between the hearts, which just adds sparkles and fills out our rainbow more. I stamped Thinking of You from the Cutie stamp set that I showed you earlier, right at the base of our rainbow. I trimmed our background down, added it to a piece of black cardstock, and then added that to a white note card that is 3.5 by 6 1/4 inches wide, which is a great mini Slimline card. This you can put in a mini Slimline envelope and put through the mail as you would normally with regular postage. And it's a fun alternate to the typical card sizes that we most do. I also like that we were able to use the wreath builder to create a rainbow or a half circle instead of a full circle. Now, if you are interested in mini Slimline cards, I recommend this new Gina K Design's Master Layouts 7-inch die set. All of the dies in this are sized to fit a mini Slimline card, so it takes the guesswork out. The inside die here has faux stitching on the inside of the cutting edge. Then the outside die is slightly bigger to create a mat for that piece. I love that. You don't have to measure anything. It's the right size. Now I got these dies after I created the card, but I wanted to share them with you if you have trouble getting the measurements for a mini Slimline card just right. I really like the Gina K Design's Master Layout die sets. I think there's 7 of them now. They have basic dies in it that can be used with different card designs. And this is the first one meant for mini Slimline. So again, it takes the guesswork out and makes creating mini Slimline cards easy. These cards aren't too big, but are a little different than what we normally do. I also really like this faux stitch label die that's included and the 2 circles that fit in it. So lots of layering that you can do without having to measure anything. Now I didn't, again, use this today, but I wanted to share with you because I think it's a brilliant product that really is helpful for those of us who struggle with getting measurements just right. Okay, let's do another card example. Now this is a basic 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. However, I wanted to show you can use this new wreath builder for that size too. And you can use sentiments along with your wreath builder to create this sentiment background that kind of radiates from the focal point. Really fun and easy to do. For this, I'm using the Critter stamp set that's included in that Eclectic Fun card kit that I showed you earlier. These little images are adorable, and there are lots of fun sentiments that match each of the little critters. I decided to use the deer along with 2 sentiments that went with it. There are coordinating dies included in the kit too. I have a piece of white cardstock at 5 3/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches. Again, that's my favorite size to use with this new wreath builder. It's big, so you can trim it down to what you want. Now I've got that center guide that I'm lining up in the center, looking at those black triangles on the top right and bottom to make sure those are centered. And I'll put my magnets on top to hold it in place. Now I'm taking the 2 sentiments from that stamp set, and I'm going to position one right along one of the diagonal lines, one of those black lines that I traced that's etched into that guide. By using that guide, I can make sure it's straight. So I've got one there just a little bit outside of that center dot. Remember that little black dot in the center is the center of that cardstock piece, so this is a little outside of it. Now I can remove that center guide and start stamping. I'm stamping with a light brown ink that will match the craft cardstock that I'll use for our base. So I stamp it, rotate it in the template, and stamp it again. I'll continue to do this until our background is covered. And again, that white cardstock is hanging out of our MISTI stamping tool, but that's okay. As long as you don't get a lot of ink on the door of your tool, your background will be fine. Okay, so we did the complete background. Now I've got the guide right on top. See how it lines up beautifully with what we've already stamped. I'm centering that, and on the little guidelines between what we've already stamped, I'm lining up another sentiment. I will close the door on our stamping tool. That'll grab the stamp. I'll remove our little guide, and we'll start stamping. Stamping, rotating, and stamping and rotating until we have our entire background stamped. So now we have alternating sentiments that form this kind of sun ray coming out from the center point of this piece of cardstock. Again, this is 5 3/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches. So I'm trimming this down to end up being 4 inches by 5 1/4 because that'll fit on a traditional A2 card size, which is what we normally make as card makers. So you can start with bigger pieces of cardstock, stamp all you want, and then trim it down. Next, I wanted to show you how I did the little banner cut on that Hey Cutie sentiment strip. I white heat embossed Hey Cutie from the Cutie stamp set I showed you earlier onto a piece of black cardstock. Now at the end of that black cardstock strip, I'm cutting a little slit right at the center. After I cut that little slit at the center, I'll cut 2 diagonal cuts, one from the corner to the end of that cut and one from the other corner to the end of the cut. And there we have a little banner edge. This will look nice on the front of our card. I also stamped, colored, and die cut the little deer along with a mushroom and a leaf. I'm using my white Arteza gel pen to add little dots onto those images just for a little pop of white against the color. It also covers up anywhere we colored outside of the lines. Finally, I'm using my Gina K Connect liquid adhesive and some white pearls to add a little bit of dimension and embellishments to the card. So it's a very simple card. That background didn't take long to do with the wreath builder that I showed you, and it builds on the sentiments that go with the image. So one of those sentiments says, "Hello, dear friend," and the other sentiment says, "You're so dear to me." So here's the completed card. Now that craft note card that we have is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, which is a typical A2 note card size that many of us use. So I was able to use that larger wreath builder for this smaller size also. Now I did mention that I'll have a video coming soon where I do additional card examples. Here's one of them. I love this card. It was so much fun to make. Very easy thanks to the kit that I showed you at the beginning and that new wreath builder that's included in it. This is a 5 by 7 card, so it's a big one. I love making 5 by 7 cards. And it's one that you can really put on display or frame if you wanted to. So I will show you in the next video how I use the wreath builder template, the new one, and the stamp set included in that kit to create this background. I will also show how to create a traditional slimline card using the same products. I really wanted to include those cards in this video, but this video is long as is. So stay tuned for that, it'll come out soon. If you're interested in the products that we talked about today, I will link them below in my YouTube description. You can also head over to my blog by clicking in the top right, where you'll be able to save the card and video if you prefer. In the middle are a couple other wreath builder videos that I hope are helpful to you too. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you again very soon with another video.